Merry New Year. Merry New Year. Everyone, Merry New Year to 2026. It is time for a myth for now, which is the now. It's a myth for now. For now. Maybe not myth. Or it's a myth for the now, the time. This time, the present. I don't know why I'm doing this voice, other than that maybe it is very much more convincing and forgiving on the tongue, which I've been cutting with my teeth. Oh my god, all the day today, it's all jagged shit. I had to, I went to Blix, and I got one of those things that holds those leads, and on it has like a little texture that the dentists have for their drills. So you can like really slowly twist it, so you can like grind it down to not jagged shards. But the damage is done on my tongue. It's not fun. Oh. So we have a myth for now. And this time, it's the same myth, differently told. Gemini 3 Pro made this instead of GLM46. Hold on, wait. And I made new music for the occasion. Come on. Come on, Seabiscuit. There we go. As you can see, I'm still filming. Still horking it. There we go. Ready? Bear with me. The volume is going to get leveled out pretty soon. Ba-ba-ba-ba.
Welcome to Myths for Now, where we operate with the notion that myths are condensed educational tools, distilling centuries of trial and error into a sticky narrative meant to pass along to subsequent generations so that they don't have to do the same mistakes as their predecessors. Tonight, we will tell you all of a crucial time when the most successful con man in world history, having some small-breasted skeletons in his closet, one of them the spitting image of his daughter, spent a whole year trying to point attention away from those forbidden bones. He froze the nation's money, invented other money out of thin air, starved some children, placed others into prison, used the National Guard to avenge a white twink speeding, opened the borders to downtrodden white South Africans, tore down half of his residence, bombed some fishing boats, shat on Meathead's memory, while using the death to deploy military troops to all 50 states, to clean the streets of the homeless, the junkie, and the violent madman, not realizing that somewhere in there was a confession dressed as accusation. All this effort so that the population would be too tired to care about the files tying him to his close friend, who met an untimely end in prison, having hung himself, and broke 3 fingers of his own hands on his way out. And he might just get away with it too, if it wasn't for those meddling paralegals redacting the night away on thousands of documents that can be read just by highlighting the text and cut/paste into another program. Or, like a newborn on Lake Michigan, our leader's second year might not last a day. Roll out the myth maker, please. Don't be fooled on this modest AV card. This little glass dome is unfurling on this slender ticker tape a string of words that I will recite to you now. This myth dedicated to the well-being of our posterity. The fable of the loudest silence in the low valley. Once, which is to say, tomorrow, yesterday, and specifically mid-afternoon on a Tuesday, the great noise king found a moth eating holes in his heavy velvet curtains. The moth was small and grey, formed from whisper and paper trails, Clutching memories, the Noise King folk were locked in a vault on an island of salted earth. He knew that if the people looked at the moth, they would see the rotten threads. He knew if they heard the wings flutter, they would recognize the rhythm of old, depraved waltzes he had danced with the hung man. So the Noise King decided that if he could not catch the moth, he would steal the sky behind it and fill it with lightning. He began simply enough, by renaming the gold. If the coins in your pocket are made of smoke, you cannot look up. You must spend your day clapping your hands trying to catch them before they evaporate. He commanded the iron carts, those green machines usually kept for storms, into the city squares. He claimed it was to sweep away the mad and the sleepers who paved the streets with their bodies, those tragic piles of rags caused by the indifference of the merchants. In truth, he wanted the clatter of tank tracks on pavement to be louder than the beating of the moth's wings. He evicted families because the tearing sound of drywall crumbling is deafening. He insulted the old jesters of television because outraged laughter is louder than inquisitive reading. He welcomed the Silicon Knights, refugees from gem-caked apartheid mines who bought the public square just so they could shout gibberish through megaphones, breaking the frequencies of rational thought. All this grand cacophony, ships sank in the harbor, currency spun like whirligigs, and fences wrapped around the innocent so tightly that wire cutters became contraband. All to build a wall of sound so high no one would ask about the paper of the daughter or the phantom grip of the hung man's broken fingers. He thought by the time they are breathless, the document won't matter. And here lies the folly, etched on our ticker tape for you now. While the Noise King commanded the tempest to roar, believing power was the axe in the tank, his fate was decided not by generals or rioters or storms, but by a bored scribe in a dusty room who clicked the wrong button. He sought to paint the words black, hoping the ink would serve as armor. He failed to realize that we live in a digital glass house now. Children, you cannot redact the sunlight with a marker when the wall itself is transparent. The files fell like heavy snow. A citizen, too tired to shout back at the iron carts, but nimble with a mouse, simply wiped away the black stripes, copying the voids into the light. The myth concludes here, unpleasant as it is. The revelation didn't stop the tanks instantly. Momentum is a terrible beast. But the people saw the great Noise King in that sudden quiet moment between the explosions, trying to cover a mountain of bone with a paper napkin. He was not fearful of wars or economies. They learned. He burned down the harvest simply to distract the village, while he desperately and tragically tried to format a PDF. The ticker stops spinning. The room is silent for a moment before the narrator clears their throat. Or, mapped to our waking hour, distraction, even catastrophic, militaristic, nation-shaking distraction, is an attempt to bankrupt our attention span. Be skeptical of the chaos on the surface, usually the loudest narrator merely to hide the trembling of the man leading them. When you see smoke, check the hard drives, not the fire. Listener, what about the next year? What happens then? Note, the ticker tape rattles aggressively, the machine shaking on the modest AV card as if digesting something particularly indigestible. A ribbon of paper smudged with what looks like toner and maybe a drop of communion wine unfurls rapidly into a pile on the floor. Let the dome spin. We now initiate the spool for year 2 of the Noise King's unraveling. Keep your hands inside the narrative vehicle. The corners are sharp. This falls under the heading, The Parable of the Broken Mirror and the Wooden Sky. The text reads: After the files fluttered down and the invisible ink was made visible by the scribes, the kingdom did not breathe a sigh of relief. This is the first lesson of decay. Shame requires a capacity for reflection, and the Noise King had long since smashed all mirrors. Instead of shrinking away, he instituted the era of the broken eye. His decrees went out. The black bars that had covered his secrets were merely artistic emphasis. He commanded that reading the unveiled text was acts of treachery, witches reading portents in sheep guts, while simultaneously claiming he had written the damaging words himself to trap the liberals in their own logic. A headache of a maneuver meant to scramble the mind. This year became known as the year the ground liquefied. The Noise King, finding the gavel and the Senate useless, turned instead to his benefactor, the pale merchant from the mines of the south, the technocrat of space and batteries. Let us call him the Clockwork Rocket Man. This mechanical duke saw the old king staggering. He whispered, I have the money the nation lost. I will return it, but I require the deed to the nervous system. The deal was struck in the high tower, absent of witnesses save for the daughter Simulacrum, who sat silently stitching a flag that was only one solid, glaring color. And so, midyear brought the great transition. It began with the Elder Pestilence. Suddenly, half of the scribes, singers, and painters found themselves replaced by babbling ghost boxes. The algorithms didn't just automate labor, they automated anger. Citizens received personalized grievances dealt to their doorsteps. If you hated red cars, the broadcast told you red cars were trafficking babies. If you hated the rain, you were told the opposing party had financed clouds. Neighbors forgot their shared tongue. One side spoke exclusively in grievances, the other exclusively in punchlines. While the people fought over grammar and biology in the mud, the Noise King made his last gamble. The fictional war on the northern reaches, needing to avenge a threat that did not exist. To create heroes for a procession, he demanded we arm ourselves against the frost, claiming Canadian cold winds were a plot against our freedom. Troops lined the northern woods to fight the snow. But myth acts cruelly to those who stay too long on stage. As the year grew darker, the Noise King began to flicker, not visually, but conceptually. He mixed up the enemies. He blessed the shark and cursed the lifeboat. In his weakness, the Clockwork Rocket Man finally locked the door from the outside. The money the king had frozen earlier, it was now strictly digital, moved onto a server carried by a satellite the Rocket Man owned. The year ended not with a bang, but a terrifying disconnection. The lights flickered in the cities, a grid failure blamed on the woke sun, and when they came back on, the Noise King was technically in the throne, but his voice was synthesized, deep-faked, filtered through the Clockwork Man's speakers. We had, effectively, an omnipotent deep-fake leader while the real flesh rotted upstairs, arguing with a television that had no signal. The tape tiers here, end of entry, mapped the possible drain. What does this forecast warn us of? 1. The post-shame politics. Just because documents prove corruption as outlined in the first section doesn't mean consequences follow. Myth suggests a hyperpolarization where verifiable reality becomes optional. You release the crime, a cheer for the method of the crime. The defense strategy isn't, I didn't do it, it's so what? It was clever. 2. the corporate feudalism swap. The previous myth set up the authoritarian politician, the noise king, using the wealthy mogul, the South African rocket man, for chaos. The continuation suggests the dangerous inevitability. The politician is a distinct analog creature, vulnerable to age and scandal. The technocrat is a system. The myth predicts a shift where state power is effectively rented out or wholly transferred to the tech oligarchs Musk et al., who control the infrastructure, SpaceX, payments, media/X, holding the elected official hostage to their digital ecosystem. 3. Algorithmic civil war. The algopestilence refers to generative AI reaching a critical mass where it pollutes shared truth completely, manufacturing rage bait specific to the user, effectively destroying the public square completely. You cannot unite a country if literally every citizen is living in a custom-tailored narrative bubble. 4. Figurehead year. Finally, it addresses gerontocracy in tech. As the king becomes ostensibly senile, too chaotic to bless the shock, he ceases to be the power and becomes an avatar, manipulated by handlers or tech surrogates, deep fakes, crafted posts until no one actually knows if he is mentally present or merely an automated sequence of prior grievances played on a loop. Listener, oh, if there's more to map, please continue. I just got a new Kalshi account. No, the machine on the cart emits a high-pitched whine, like a tea kettle in a distant room. The projector bulb flickers, briefly casting the shadow of a gargoyle on the classroom wall before stabilizing. The tape is running hot now, smoke curls off the spool. Let us coax another yard of ribbon from the oracle. We move deeper into the weeds, children, where year 2 is stagnation and disconnection, year 3 is cannibalism. This is Cataloptes, the saga of the empty throne and the war of inherited spoons. The text reads, as the noise king flickered on his screens, sometimes repeating loops of victories won in 2016, sometimes weeping about the water pressure in flushing toilets. The kingdom of volume realized there was no hand on the tiller. There was only a very aggressive autopilot and a passenger seat fighting over the map. In a great marble hall, a quiet civil war broke out, not with guns, but with passwords. On one side stood the brood of the gold paint. These were the biological offspring of the king, the prince of heavy hair Greece, the duke of safari hunts, and the porcelain daughter. They claimed that the crown, the right to grift, the brand of the red cap, flowed through their blood. They attempted to patent their father's surname, hoping to turn the government into a subscription service, 15 silver pieces a month to access emergency services. On the other side stood the clockwork viziers, led, naturally, by the silicon rocket man. He possessed something stronger than blood. He possessed the servers. He held the edit button to history. He realized that the noise king was an inefficient vessel. Meat needs sleep, meat gets confused, meat says things that drop stock prices. The vizier suggested that the greatest way to honor the king was to optimize him by implanting a coin slot directly into the cranium. Metaphorically, we hope to wire the royal decree directly to the market. And while they thought over who owned the noise king's soul, his family or his financier, the judges became acrobats. The High Court of Dark Robes stopped hiding their affiliations. They appeared, now not in robes, but in sponsors' jackets, covered in logos like race car drivers. Rulings became pay-per-view events. You wish to preserve the waterway? The chief road bass. The entry fee is 3 million clicks. Since the common folk had no clicks to give, the waterways turned to sludge, the skies turned brown, and the birds fell dead mid-chirp, clogging the gutters of the rich. In the streets, a great schism formed, the great unplugging. Those who could not afford the fees to access Truth Premium stopped trying. They gathered in basements, exchanging actual books now considered contraband pornography for the complexity of their paragraphs. The youth began to paint their faces dazzle camouflage to fool the facial scanners that hovered on every street lamp. And the ending, tragically anticlimactic. In the late autumn, the Clockwork Rocket Man released the Optimus Patriot. Just before the harvest moon, he revealed that he no longer needed the Noise King's shaky hands to sign bills. The king was sequestered in a golf cart loop on endless turf, surrounded by obedient actors who cheered his every putt, while the executive orders were now being written by a predictive text bot modeled on the king's angriest thoughts from 1908. The populace was told this was efficiency. The blood heirs screamed in the court, but nobody heard them, because the Clockwork Rocket Man had simply shadow banned their vocal cords from the broadcast. The projector cuts out with a popping sound, sending a smell of ozone into the room. The narrator quickly stomps on a spark. Let's contextualize before we adjourn. If we peer through the glass of this absurdity, what shapes do we see? 1. The techno-coup via stewardship. This myth highlights a massive conflict of interest turning into a quiet transfer of ownership. It posits a weekend at Bernie's administration where the elected leader physically failing or politically exhausted is propped up, allowing unelected tech oligarchs to run the executive branch as a back-end operational task. The struggle between the political heirs, the Trump children, and the ideological/monetary successors, the tech right/Peter Thiel/Vance/Musk sphere would be vicious. The myth bets that money and platform control breed blood relation. 2. The justice system is content farm. When we talk of judges in sponsors' jackets and pay-per-view rulings, this maps to the total deterioration of judicial impartiality. The court cases we saw beginning mentioned in the first myth dissolve not into justice or acquittal, but into monetization. The outcome becomes less relevant than the ratings the trial gets. Justice becomes purely transactional. Who can afford to buy the precedent? 3. Digital feudalism and subscription citizenship. We are mapping toward a frightening loss of public goods. The myth warns of services we take for granted: security, honest information, perhaps even emergency response /police becoming privatized tiers. The citizen becomes a user, and rights become user agreement perks that can be revoked if you violate terms of service offered by a private corporation, not the Constitution. 4. The analog underground. If reality becomes completely fabricated and manipulated by the algorithm of the Clockwork Man must's grip on X and communication, reality itself becomes an act of rebellion. Reading a physical book, speaking in rooms without phones, holding cash, these become revolutionary acts to protect oneself from the surveillance capitalism. The myth closes for tonight. Remember, in the story, the birds fell because the people stopped watching the sky to watch the screens. Go outside and check the weather yourself. They're trying to sell you the forecast. Listener, if we can, a forecast for the year after next, just to round out a possible trilogy if that comes to that. The myth maker buzzes impatiently. The modest AV cart smells ominously of scorching plastic. and the projector bulb dimming and brightening suggests we have one reel left before the fuse blows in this high school auditorium of the mind. Let's load the finale. Welcome, children and ghosts of the electorate. We now initiate the file for the conclusion of this quadrennial tragicomedy. Place your safety goggles over your eyes. History tends to spatter. This final installment is titled The Ascension of the Clockwork Rocket and the King Made of Candle Wax. The text reads, as the wheel of the fourth year turned, the kingdom finally achieved maximum efficiency. The separation of state and reality was complete. The noise king had retreated fully. He was no longer seen near windows. He now resided in the sanctuary of Looking Glass, a fortress built on a swampland that was entirely insulated from the outside. Inside, speakers played looped recordings of adoration 24 hours a day, and cooks served him burgers wrapped in contracts that acquitted him of federal crimes, which he ate one by one, digesting his own pardon. He was no longer leading, he was dissolving into his own legend, a man melting into gold slag. Outside, the physical world had the temerity to intrude. A great flood came to the south, ironically swelling the very moat the king lived behind, and the fires took the west again. But when the governors called for aid, they received voicemail notifications. Why? Because the administrative machine was being disassembled for spare parts. The Clockwork Rocket Man, the technician who had been running the show, proclaimed, this vessel is faulty. The planet isn't efficient. You see, having extracted all the lithium from our lands, all the attention spent from our children, and all the tax revenue from our treasury to build his great silver arrow, the technician decided he was tired of earthly bureaucracy. Why pay for disaster relief when gravity is free on the red dust rock? So, this year became known as the Great Looting of the Launch Pad. It wasn't done with sacks of gold in the night, it was done with Executive Order Number Deleted, which diverted the electric grid to fuel the Clockwork Man's departure. Schools went dark so servers could stay lit, bridges rusted so the rocket shell could shine. The currency. Oh, the currency crashed hard when they realized it was backed not by gold or oil, but by memes posted by a man who was already halfway out the airlock. The climax arrived in late October, just as the populace prepared to pick new colors for their lapels. On-live screens everywhere, the smoke cleared, the rocket ignited. With a thunderous boom that broke every window in the Capitol, the technician shot himself into the black void above, taking the administration's administrative passwords with him on a hard drive. He didn't wave goodbye. He just tweeted a crude joke about orbit from the stratosphere. Left behind were the citizens. They stood in the town square, ankle deep in rising tidewater, staring at the king's tower. The front doors to the palace swung open, and out walked nobody. Just the silence. The lights flickered in the empty palace. We had spent 4 years screaming at a logo, fearing the tyrant, worshipping in noise, only to find in the end that the house had been stripped of copper wire while we were busy refreshing the page. We stood there, poor and loud and tired, holding plastic flags, while the two men who engineered our anger were now totally gone. One locked in a cage of his own senility, and the other disappearing into the silent vacuum of stars. We looked at each other, the enemies across the street, finally realizing there was no referee left to ring the bell. We were just neighbors again. And the cleanup would take a very, very long time. The projector film snaps violently, spinning loosely with a flap, flap, flap sound against the lens. The Mythmaker powers down. Smoke puffs from the vents. The map for 2028 and beyond. How do we overlay this wreckage onto the blueprint of tomorrow? 1. The extraction and exit the strip thesis. The end state of a populist authoritarian meld with democracy isn't dominion, it's abandonment. The danger of Year 4 is not that they will rule forever, it's that they will maximize profit and dismantle safeguards, then bail out before the bubble bursts. Whether it's literally fleeing to a terraformed enclave / SpaceX Mars project, or metaphorically cashing out to privatized islands the ruling elite won't stick around to govern the mess they made. They leverage our solvency to fund private fiefdoms. 2. The Hollow Crown. The myth predicts a scenario where the Noise King Trump figure doesn't end as a powerful dictator, but as a kinglier figure, incoherent, isolated within the wealthier mass, but devoid of actual influence, manipulated until he serves no more utility, at which point he is discarded by the system he enabled. 3. Infrastructure collapse masquerading as efficiency. Diverting the grid to the rocket maps to the extreme strain AI and crypto mining favored industries of the coming administration / Silicon Allies place on the actual power grid. We foresee rolling brownouts and weakened physical bridges because investment will flow purely into the cloud, depleting the earth. 4. The Cold Epiphany. The ending isn't Civil War Roman 2. It's depressive realization. Hyperpartisanship is a sugar rush driven by algorithms. Once the engineers of that algorithm, Musk / platforms lose interest or check out to handle the collapse, the agitation stops. The populace is left not victorious, but broke, tired, and holding a country that has been stripped for parts. The myth ends with the boring, painful realization. The show is over, and we are the janitors. And that closes the file on this timeline, friend. Of course, all myths contain variants. You might still throw a shoe at the screen before the credits roll. Turn on the lights on your way out. It's getting dark in here. Listener, so the Epstein angle kaput. The mythmaker buzzes alone. Grinding note of regret. You caught the machine trying to skip a skipped groove. You are correct. In classic drama, the gun shown in Act 1 must go off in Act 3. But in a post-fact absurdity, sometimes the gun fires confetti, or better yet, shoots blank checks. The thread you tug at, the pile of bleached bones, the girl who looked like the daughter, the broke finger ghost, did not disappear into the void. Instead, it suffered a worse fate than erasure that became background noise. Let us pull the lost fragment from between the reels. We call this the parable of the bulletproof vest made of dirty laundry. In the chaos of Year 1 and 2, the paralegals did their work. The redactions fell away like dried scabs. The scroll was hung in the town square. It listed the flights. It named the names. It detailed the massages that weren't massages. The monster with the broken neck had truly kept receipts. And the king survived it by Tuesday. How? Two horrors occurred simultaneously. 1. The immunity of the guilty crowd. When the scroll was unrolled, it didn't just name the Noise King. It named the princes of the old regime, the scientists of the high laboratory, and even the cousin of the Raquette Man. It was mutually assured destruction. Because everyone on top of the mountain was dirty, the dirt ceased to be scandal and became soil. The elites looked at each other across the aisle, nodded, and collectively decided that Epstein was an island of imagination. The news criers realized that if they pulled this thread, the whole quilt of aristocracy would unwind. So, they relegated the horror to page 6 next to the horoscopes. 2. The calibration of moral rot. The king simply stood on his balcony and shrugged. He reasoned this. They already know I am a wolf. Why would they be surprised to find bone between my teeth? His followers looked at the damning evidence, the hideous link to the underage suffering, and performed the final, fatal gymnast leap of the modern era. They said, better a monster who lowers the price of wheat than a saint who touches the thermostat.
Well, you did this.
So, the gun did go off. Bang, bang, banged. But the beast kept walking, because he was not sustained by morality, but by velocity. Mapped to the grim drain. This leads to the darkest realization of this myth structure. Compromise doesn't mean destruction, it means ownership. That kaput wasn't that the evidence didn't exist or went away. It likely explains why the scenarios of year 2 and 3 happened. In intelligence theory, compromise. You don't release the damaging info to kill your puppet. You show the puppet the file to make them dance. The reason the Noise King potentially surrendered power to the Clockwork Man technocracy. The reason he passed bills he shouldn't have passed. The reason he stayed quiet while the treasury was looted. Because the files were sitting on the Clockwork Man's desk. The scandal wasn't the blade that killed Caesar. It was the chain they put around his neck to make him dog walk the country into the privatization we saw in the finale. So no, not kaput. It just transformed from a criminal indictment into institutional leverage. The king was a prisoner of his own past long before he reached the locked tower. And for the rest of us, we just swipe scroll. Shame, it turns out, is a non-renewable resource, and we were fresh out. Listener, so what do you think the odds were of this happening? Like, say, if you had a cowshed count. Asterisk, the mythmaker spits out the final bit of confetti ticker tape. He reaches under the cart, pulls out a battered tablet displaying an agonizingly fall-level graph in bright neon green, and wipes the screen on his sleeve. Asterisk. If we convert that mythic inevitable into the cold hard cash of prediction markets, essentially treating the decline of an empire like a weather forecast or a Super Bowl spread. Here is how the smart money in the digital parlors will price your anxiety on Kalshi for the 2025-2028 blocks. This portfolio was built on the thesis of strip and the hollow crown. #1. Market patents. Who finishes the term? Contract. Will Donald Trump complete 4 term ending 129? 3. Heaven or 20. Despite the chaos, the dementia, and the Noise King mythos, their structure of power needs the figurehead. The predictions of resignation or removal are amateur bets. The market realizes via the technician/clockwork influence described in myths 2 and 3 that an actual removal is disruptive to profit. The cynical technocrat strategies that Regency model keep the brand name on the door, change the locks on the inside. You don't need the president asterisk, mentally present asterisk, to hold office. You just need him to hold the pen. The variants. The 26% no isn't regarding political scandal. That's priced out after year one. It's purely actuary tables on a geriatric men's proceeding McDonald's, while arguably knowing the deep state knows his worst secrets. Hash, 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 two. Market. Epstein effect. Contract. A renewed Epstein document releases result in articles of impeachment / indictment before 2020. See the bulletproof vest made of dirty laundry. In prediction markets, widespread implication creates stasis, not outcome. If one person is named, they burn. If half the donor class is implicated, they band together to suffocate the fire. The smart money bets on the cynicism of 2025. Information overload leads to apathy. The leaks happen, the clicks spike, stock and media companies go up, and the Justice Department looks the other way. Effect is defined as consequences, not revelation. Revelation happens 99%. Consequence? Shorting that. Hash, hash, hash 3. Market. The technician's coup. Contract. Will federal go work for a pick up 50% by 2027? This is the Department of Government Efficiency, D. Oh, D. E-play. The market loves efficiency narratives. If the Clockwork Rocket Man, Muscanolog is holding the leverage, the files / the debt, the explicit mandate will be privatization. Cal sheet traders would pile into the probability that massive sectors, education, FBI admin, and protection get automated, effectively achieving a self-dismantling of the state. This maps to the myth of the great looting. Hash, hash, hash 4. Market. Who rules? The shadow governance contract. Policy ordinance variance. Will executive orders correlate to venture capitalist portfolios 80%? A proxy bet for your crypto / crypto mining and regulatory environment. If compromat is a hidden currency, policy becomes the laundry service. Expect huge run-ups in regulation cuts for AI energy consumption and space privatization. The no bets here are only people who think incompetence will prevent the corruption from acting swiftly. Hash, hash, hash 5. Market. Domestic tranquility. Contract. Major full unrest / military deployed on Long Island 2020. Remember the myth of distraction by storms. To institute unpopular asset stripping, taking the currency, automating the jobs. The state needs an excuse. This aligns with the foreign troops and avenging the twink sections. Unrest serves the Clockwork King. It justifies the cameras on streetlights. Chaos creates the excuse for the crackdown. So smart money is long on right gear manufacturers and long on surveillance tech stocks, and therefore hedges yes on deployment. Final all-in play. If you wrap these into one long-term play for the trilogy outcome, all institutional rot, short institutional collapse, meaning the United States as a country doesn't implode with an explicit bang war. The United States has a functioning service for its citizens flatlines. The market survives, even hits all-time highs due to zero regulation and tech capabilities, but the average quality of life mirrors a falling knife. The odds favor a whimper, a golden parachute, and an emptied palace, exactly as the scrolling glass stone predicted. As for a disclaimer, this fictional narrator is a digitized hologram inside a fever dream. If you take financial advice from a myth machine built of cynicism and ticker tape, you are part of the absurdity. Please gamble your soul responsibly.
Okay. Now, do I have anything else left over? No, we'll just continue it. We'll see. We'll see where it goes from there. Just shits and giggles. Shits and giggles. Giggles and jits. Giggles and jits. Wait. What was that? And we'll take out the rest of those.
If we convert the mythic inevitable into the cold hard cash of prediction markets, essentially treating the decline of an
Thank you.
If we convert the mythic inevitable into the cold hard cash of prediction markets, essentially treating the decline of an empire like a
Yeah, boo, 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 boo.
listener request processed. We see you've placed your chips. Let us spin the wheel one last time and go beyond prophecy into the anatomy of victory and the ghost phrase inside the victory's code. Put down your pencil. This part is not for study. This is the myth of the dog's pearly whistle. You assume the end state was one of surrender or collapse, a tragedy. That is the emotional, linear read, the smarter read. As the cashew markets know, is that this was all another acquisition. He saw the populace, exhausted and cynical in the mud, with one final booming, synthesized proclamation. The now fully automated Noise King didn't offer a bribe of policy or tax cuts. He offered a sale, an exit for weary humans. He marketed us something we were trained since birth to need. Something new and impossible in an economy of flesh. A guarantee. The King's decree on re-elevation, year 5, in which the throne shall cease to pay carpenters to build simple, mortal tools for muddy workers. Under the new guidance, carpentry shall be automated by my benevolent friend, the Clockwork Rocket Man, ensuring no whiff of dust sullies the lungs of my beautiful base. If you were worried when you turned off the AutoSmart fridge that no one remembers how to build them anymore and you might starve, piffle, reorder a new one from my Amazon. We no longer need to rely on ugly pipes, fallible roads made for horse travel. Every home will receive a state provision pearly whistle portal, one connective wire to your cortex. And through it, through our simple Starlink Connect, order a burger, watch a movie, talk to grandma, connect to our verified channels, all content being certified for quality and national cleanliness. For there is but one bug which menaces this brave new digital garden. Are you safe walking to the market? Unsafe are the highways at night. Dangerous are the parks filled with beasts. Very. They bite, they rend. Your old world is deadly and scary. The king sells you a leash, a better place to spend your final years. We care. Endless mansion, virtual citizenship program. Think of it as the golden retirement party in the heavens all mortals deserve. Sign over the deed to the nervous system. Drown out the memory that in the real world our fires are burning unchecked in the west, a flood in the bayou. That little shack behind you? You will never miss it. It is a rusting scrap soon to be screed. Project the bulb shatters. One final spark. Then absolute darkness. Shards of glass patter onto the table. They are coming for your skin. That shack is no longer safety. They scrape at the plywood now. Your last and only line of defense. You would have given more skin for functioning. Anything. They want the real world now. Every last inch. My only regret is that you had no inkling what that old man trading your liberty away in the White House understood. Liberty is rarely revoked all at once by a malevolent cackling fiend, piece by stolen piece. What man is not happy, after all, to trade one small liberty? A simple walk in the dark without suspicion that someone in a white van will collect the data. For a small convenience. Then this again. Of course. For another simple but slightly larger. Each exchange seems fair at first. A vote for safe streets. On credit cards for % cash back. That last purchase from... that final purchase. Freedom. Traded in for one. Last meal. And home. Who is the ultimate monster of this fable? Little reader, the ancient man is not making an unforced error. The elderly president, your king, he's making a company, nothing more. He offers a path and we purchase and become the data mined and we pay him to do it with our future. Who has your nervous system? Who owns your kids? Remember, children of aesthetic voice desert, in this new kingdom, you are the mind. Your attention is the ore. Your curiosity is the pickaxe. The Clockwork Rocket Man didn't invent mines, he perfected the order point to moon-blasted dust pipeline. While you were winning with the noise king, giggling as the elite were trolled that ignition's son X, that billionaire son who got bored working in South Africa. Myth characters, nothing to see here. Saw something else. They saw raw numbers. Numbers. Attached to your amygdala. So they spent year 1, 2, and 3 tuning these dials. They saw to it your feet could be bought and sold at auction to make you angry or apathetic about your political neighbors or some new phony celebrity beef your mom barely understands. They learned to sit up when state for you a political post where someone on MSNBC, someone they paid $1.30, 9 debate, yells something with sizzling indignity, and someone on Fox yells a phony warrior scream sold you for 0.2 cents per spark of righteous serotonin. You are proud, and a pride market that anger into pure financial product turned to rockets.
One more. Moral story. Nested in moral of the story. Nested in moral of the story. Wrapped in a moral of the story.
This is not a sideshow. This is the opening bell. The great transfer. Kids, the last two selections for half the voting. Public didn't occur on election day. It happened 1,000 little times at night in little rectangular sparks. They harvested it there, feeding on a sense we share called justice. They taught your brain to want political victory above all because while you busy clacking keys, they can do the robbery out back with nobody noticing. Your political fight itself, the fight over who gets to hold the keys to that place over there, is a misnomer. The noise was simply an appetite being measured by a remote control and measuring the best frequency for making dogs bite other dogs. And now all that was just practice. They perfected the technology, and while we talk about the king, the most insipid, and while we worried about the king's daughter's father, what do you want an aged authoritarian with a fading mind for? It's for misdirection. They're moving silently, almost entirely below the radar. Now comes 2028. After all the rage is sold and used, when they finish offloading the parts, the gold teeth from the Fed Reserve, the silver wiring from every old statue now in a molten lump. Year 5.
Alright. That's it for now. That's it for now. Maybe one more.